In this video, we'll cover Thymeleaf with Spring Boot. So you may wonder, well, what exactly is Thymeleaf? Well, it's a Java templating engine. It's an open source project, and you can get details on it at thymeleaf.org. It's commonly used to generate HTML views for web apps. However, it's a general purpose templating engine, so you can actually use Thymeleaf outside of web apps, and I'll talk more on this later. One thing I'd like to point out is that it's a separate project. It's unrelated to Spring.io, and you can actually create Java apps with Thymeleaf with no need for Spring. However, there's a lot of synergy between the two projects, so you hear them mentioned and used on similar projects. And I'd like to make one quick digression here. Whenever I present on Thymeleaf, I always get the question how to pronounce it. Should we say Thymeleaf or Thymeleaf, or what is it? The correct pronunciation is Thymeleaf. So the H is silent. This is similar to the words like Thomas, Thailand, and so on. So basically the H is silent. So the correct pronunciation is Thymeleaf. All right. Hopefully that clears it up for you. Now, what is a Thymeleaf template? Well, it can be an HTML page with some Thymeleaf expressions. It can also include dynamic content from Thymeleaf expressions. And so here's an example of an HTML page. You have HTML tags, and then you have these Thymeleaf expressions. So they can access Java code, objects, Spring Beans, and so on. The next question is, well, where's a Thymeleaf template processed? Well, in a web app, Thymeleaf is processed on the server. So the results are included in the HTML and returned to the browser. So here's an example. The web browser sends a request over to Spring MVC controller. The controller adds some data to the model, sends it over to the template, and then the template sends back HTML to the web browser. Let's look at the Thymeleaf demo. We'll have our web browser send a request over to a Spring MVC controller, add some data to the model, send it over to our Thymeleaf template, and then I'll actually send back that generated HTML. So the output here will simply say time on the server is, and we simply plug in the actual server timestamp. Let's look at the development process for this demo. So the first thing we'll do is we'll add Thymeleaf to the Maven POM file. Then we'll develop the Spring MVC controller. And then finally, we'll create the Thymeleaf template. Okay, step one of adding Thymeleaf to the Maven POM file. So in your POM file, you simply give a reference here for Spring Boot Starter Thymeleaf. Or if you're creating a brand new project from scratch at start.spring.io, you just type in Thymeleaf for the list of dependencies and it'll add it to your given project. And of course, it'll put it in the Maven POM file. And then based on this, Spring Boot will auto-configure to use Thymeleaf templates. And that's it. There's no additional configuration that you need to set up to make use of Thymeleaf with Spring Boot. So with step two of developing a Spring MVC controller, this is exactly like the coding that we created before. We have our @controller, we set up our @get mapping, we add some data to the model, and then we return hello world. And since we have a Thymeleaf dependency in the Maven POM, Spring will auto-configure to use Thymeleaf. So it'll look for this template file in source main resources /templates hello world.html, and you get all of that support for free. Now let's dig into this a bit more as far as placing a Thymeleaf template. So in Spring Boot, your Thymeleaf template file goes in the source main resources /templates. And then for web apps, the Thymeleaf templates will have a .html extension. Okay, with step three, we'll create the Thymeleaf template. So remember, our template is basically an HTML file, and we can drop in some Thymeleaf expressions. So let me zoom in here for a second. So the one thing that we'll do up top is we'll set up the XML namespace for :th. That's to use the Thymeleaf expressions. And then we use that expression here for th:\text. And that'll give us this output here. Time on the server is, and then we plug in the actual date. Now you may wonder, well, where did we get the date? I mean, where did that come from? Is it a magic term, or how did that work out? Well, actually, it's from our Spring MVC model. So up top, we had the model.add attribute, the date. And so Thymeleaf will actually access the date from the Spring MVC model, and then we'll use that for the given output of this given HTML page. Alrighty, now there's some additional features with Thymeleaf. It can make use of loops and conditionals. You can make use of CSS and JavaScript integration. You can also have template layouts and fragments, and you can get the gory details of all this stuff at the website thymeleaf.org.